Today, we are diving into a really profound piece of philosophy, and the title itself tells a whole story. It's like a chain reaction of human confusion. It goes like this: profit muddles intellect, intellect muddles the heart, and the heart, well, that muddles our true nature. It's this wild domino effect that, believe it or not, might just explain some of life's biggest struggles. Okay, let's get into it.
So right out of the gate, the source text hits us with a question that I think we've all wrestled with at some point. Why does life so often feel, well, fragile, like a fleeting bubble of sorrow and regret? Why do we sometimes feel so lost, so caught up in suffering, before we even feel like we've gotten started? It's a heavy question for sure, but it gets right to the core of what we're talking about today.
And the answer it gives is just fascinatingly direct. It doesn't point to things like fate or bad luck or society. Nope. It says the culprits are hiding inside of us. It points the finger at three things: our chase for profit, our over-reliance on our intellect, and the tricky nature of our own heart. These three are the root of all the confusion.
All right, so let's break this down and look at that very first domino to fall. How exactly does this idea of profit manage to cloud our thinking, to muddle our intellect? Because remember, this is the trigger. This is what kicks off the entire chain reaction.
Now, it's super important to understand what the source means by profit. We're not just talking about money in the bank. The idea here is way broader. It's about that relentless, hungry pursuit of external things. We're talking power, wealth, and fame. You know, that constant chase for more of something outside of ourselves. And when that chase becomes an obsession, well, the consequences can be absolutely devastating. The source argues that when we're blinded by this desire for gain, we literally lose our ability to think straight. You see people betraying their family, their friends, throwing away an incredible future, and in the most tragic cases, even losing their own lives. All for what? For profit. But, and this is a really key point, it's not saying all profit is evil. There's a huge distinction to be made. There's what you could call good profit, the kind you earn by genuinely helping and serving other people. And then there's disastrous profit, which is all about scheming, stepping on others, and pure self-interest. One builds you up, and the other? It will tear you and everything around you down. Okay, so you follow? Once our intellect is clouded by this desperate chase for gain, the next domino falls. That corrupted, muddled way of thinking then starts to mess with our heart. So let's see how that works. The central idea here is explained with this really beautiful and simple metaphor. Think of your heart, your core intuition, your emotional center, as a mirror. That's its job, to simply reflect the world as it truly is. And this lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got the clear mirror, a clear heart. It reflects reality without any distortion, and that leads to clarity, to vitality, to feeling alive. But on the other side, you have the dusty mirror. And what is that dust? According to the source, that dust is our own intellectual arrogance, our pride in how smart we think we are. It doesn't just block the reflection, it twists it, distorts it, and leads to nothing but confusion.
And this leads to such a wild paradox that the source points out. You would think that being super intelligent would mean you have a clearer view of things, right? Wrong. In fact, it argues that some of the most brilliant people out there, writers, thinkers, you name it, can actually have the dimmest or most darkened hearts. Why? Because their own cleverness becomes the very dust that covers their mirror.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most critical link in this whole chain. A dusty, muddled heart now goes on to obscure the deepest part of us, our true fundamental nature.
So here's the real problem with relying on our heart as our ultimate guide. It's not actually reality. It's just a reflection of reality. And that reflection is always shifting, always changing, depending on what's happening around us. To put it another way, the heart is always reacting, and that makes it a totally unreliable compass.
This just brings up such a sharp, personal question. I mean, think about it for a second. Can you really honestly trust your own heart to stay the same? To feel the same way tomorrow as it does today? If you can't even guarantee that for yourself, how in the world can you put your complete faith in the constantly changing hearts of other people? It's a tough one.
Okay, so if the pursuit of profit is a trap, our intellect can be deceiving, and our heart is unreliable, what is left? Where do we turn? Well, thankfully, the source doesn't just leave us stranded with the problem. It points to a way out. It's called seeing your nature.
So unlike that fickle, ever-changing heart, our true nature is described as something stable, something permanent. You know that old saying, mountains and rivers may change, but human nature is hard to alter? That's the idea. This deep, inherent nature is the one anchor we have in the storm, the one thing we can actually rely on.
And to really drive this point home, the text pulls out this incredible quote from the Buddhist master Bodhidharma. His point is pretty radical. He's basically saying that if you don't connect with this fundamental nature, all the external stuff, all the chanting, reading scriptures, following rules, it's all useless. It has no benefit. The real work has to happen on the inside.
And this idea echoes the famous teaching from the Buddha himself. When we live our lives disconnected from that true nature, everything we do, everything we build, everything we chase, it's all like a dream, or a bubble, or a shadow. It feels real for a moment, but then, poof, it's gone.
So, at the end of the day, we're presented with two completely different ways to live. We can live in the illusion, a life of just being busy, constantly doing things that ultimately leads back to a feeling of emptiness. Or we can choose to live from our true nature, a life that the Source says literally merges with eternity, a life that becomes its own kind of heaven.
So, what's the takeaway from all this? How do we wrap this up? The conclusion isn't just an idea to think about. It's really a call to action. It's about letting your true nature finally blossom.
And the Source gives us a pretty clear 4-step guide to breaking this whole cycle of confusion. First, stop chasing that disastrous kind of profit that just clouds your mind. Second, don't get so caught up in showing off how smart you are that you create dust on your own mirror. Third, stop trying to navigate life using your fickle, unreliable heart as a compass. And finally, number 4, just get out of the way and let your true, unchanging nature blossom and guide you.
And that brings us right back to that beautiful, simple metaphor we talked about. And it leaves us with one final, crucial question to really ask ourselves. When you look at your own life, at your decisions, at your state of mind, is your mirror dusty?